I can only imagine how constraining a Zoom presentation is for Dr. Gaines because he interacts with his audience and in person delivers an engaging, enthusiastic presentation that rivets your attention. I'm sure he'll pull this virtual platform off. But before joining A&M Real Estate Center in 2005, Dr. Gaines spent 16 years with KPMG and Arthur Andersen, providing real estate consulting services. He also served as the president of Rice Center, an urban research center affiliated with Rice University, when he directed the real estate, urban economics, and demographic research programs for 5 years. Dr. Gaines started his career as an assistant professor of finance and real estate at Kent State University, and later was an associate professor of real estate and finance at the University of South Carolina, where he taught undergraduate and graduate level real estate courses. So Dr. Gaines, again, thank you for being here again. It's a little different this year, but I'm handing it over to you.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's see if I can push all of the right buttons. Hopefully, all of you are seeing a title slide. And I have to tell you, Bill, you're right. It's really interesting, and we're doing these. This is, I don't know, it's about the 12th or 13th, maybe more than that, presentation I've done this way, the virtual presentation. And it's really weird because I'm sitting here in this is my office at home, because like everybody else working from home. And all I'm doing is talking to my computer. I have to literally turn off all of the video. So I don't see anybody's face. I don't see anybody's feedback. I'm going to tell jokes to myself, and if you see me laugh along or don't laugh along, it'll be all right. We'll see what happens with it. But it's been an interesting time period. It's not over yet. We're still right in the middle of all of this stuff. And when they asked me for a title, this is a title I've used here a couple of times. It just, all bets are off. What you need to know is we are officially in a recession. If you didn't know it, welcome to the world. A couple of buzzwords that are being bannered about a lot is, first of all, worst on record, and hopefully I think we may be beyond the worst on record. That's second quarter, and most of the data we've gathered for the last couple of months have been really bad. The don't have a clue is, let me just preface the entire presentation with that one. There is not an economist in the world that really knows what's going on.
I'm not even taking my computer for somebody walking around with him anyway.
How to project what's going on and what to anticipate. I'll give you my best shot at it, but quite frankly, you got to remember all the models. It's just like your model, maybe in working in your business. They're all models and economic models and so forth that we use to try to guesstimate what's going to happen in the future. They're all based on the past. They're all based on historical relationships and correlations and data trends and rates of change and all of those kind of things. Well, this is all new. This has never happened before. We've never had a mandatory shutdown that basically we had a mandated recession where, because of the pandemic, because of the virus, we just had to shut everything down. Anyway, NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, that's the group of economists, and there's a subcommittee that does market cycles. And they have officially said that February of this year was the peak in the prior cycle. Since 2010, actually since 2009, June of 2009, coming out of the Great Recession, we had 128 continuous months of growth and prosperity. That ended in February, and that set the record, incidentally, for the longest period of time of continuous expansion. But as of then, we started down, and which officially or unofficially means that you're in a recession. All right, so how bad is it? There's that buzzword. Well, it's the worst on record. The Congressional Budget Office came out. They came out back in May or April, I think, with the estimate that the pandemic was probably going to cost our economy roughly $8 trillion over the next 10 years. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. That might turn out to even be a little optimistic, that it might be more than that in terms of cost. This is a negative. Unemployment claims are way up. We're up over 54 million, around 3 million in Texas. Oil price, of course, Texas got hit with a double whammy. Back in January, February, I know that's a long time to have to remember. Most of us have already tuned out January and February of this year. But if you'll recall, the Saudis and the Russians decided to get together and have a price war on oil and drive the price of oil down. They ostensibly, they were fighting against each other, but unofficially, they were actually coming after the American fracturing industry as well. And it worked down through and including one day in April when the price of oil, the price of West Texas Intermediate crude went negative, like negative $35, which was unheard of and unprecedented. Basically, the producers were having to pay people to take the oil off their hands. That's how bad, that's what a negative price of oil means. Well, since then, it has had some recovery, and as all of you who may be following it, it's been bouncing around in the $40 a barrel range, plus or minus a couple of dollars. I looked at it this morning, I think it was 42, but it's been bouncing around there, and it doesn't seem to be moving anytime soon. The big reason, of course, is that demand is down. But that started us in Texas. So we started out with an energy oil price bust in January, February that went on through until April. And then, of course, the pandemic hit in the middle of March or toward the end of March and on into April and May. So we've gotten hit pretty hard on that. Dallas-Fort Worth, quite frankly, doesn't get hit nearly as hard on the energy decline. Went through 2015 and 2016. For those of you who heard me then, I told you then, we were having an energy bust during those years with the price decline. But Dallas-Fort Worth area kind of just went right on through that, didn't even blink. We do have a bunch of mortgages in forbearance. These are mostly residential mortgages, of course. The forbearance issue with commercial real estate has been a mixed bag. A lot of lenders have given some forbearance to their borrowers with commercial holdings. The major players operate, of course, at a different level. If you're dealing with small freestanding buildings and properties, getting forbearance on a loan when all of a sudden the government has told you to shut your doors and don't do any business, or all your customers have disappeared anyway, like for restaurants, a lot of freestanding retail, some medical office, all kinds of mixture there of different kinds of properties. The whole forbearance foreclosure issue there is still wiggling a lot, if you will. I told you, we don't know. It's worst on record. We don't know how to deal with this. The CMBS market has a higher delinquency rate. A lot of the collateralized mortgages from commercial real estate that went into there have been in trouble. The federal deficit is and debt in general, the overall debt level, but particularly the sovereign debt and the corporate debt are the two dark clouds on the horizon, and they're getting darker. No surprise here with all of the. It's interesting that the government is calling it all stimulus money. There's no stimulus to it. This is survival money. The CARES Act, the $600 on unemployment insurance benefit that just gave out. We'll talk about that in a minute. The PPP program, all of these things, these were not stimulus programs. These were survival programs. And of course now we're seeing that our leadership really can't get their act together and get over the politics and keep things moving for the economy. They're just bickering back and forth and going back and forth. I mean, with everything else going on, the biggest problem too is we got these elections coming up in November. And so the politicians just can't help themselves. They are politicians. And so everything becomes body politic. But nevertheless, the federal government's going to wind up borrowing about $4 trillion this year. It's in the second quarter alone, the Treasury wound up having to issue almost $3 trillion worth of new debt. So this is coming on. In corporate America, of course, if you look at balance sheets of corporate America across the board, you find that they are very heavily laden with debt. They went into debt. They borrowed heavily here the last couple of years, mainly because the cost of borrowing was so low. The interest rates were so low. The biggest problem with that is that corporate America has not really been investing those borrowed funds into productive activities. They've been doing basically financial management. They've been they're buying back shares of stock. That keeps the earnings per share up. Even if earnings go down, if they can reduce the number of shares quickly enough, they can keep earnings per share up, which keeps share prices up. The structure of the corporate balance sheet is a real problem that somewhere down the line is going to have to be covered up. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. And what is recovery? And here we're talking about economic recovery, of course. And really, I probably should have put the very first line on here, shouldn't be jobs and spending. It's not. The very first line on here is we have to get the virus under control. We have to get it normalized. Don't ask me what that means. Don't ask me what control or normalized means. I have no earthly idea, and I don't think anybody else does either. But we got to get a handle on it. We can't just have people, millions of people coming down with the illness, hundreds of thousands of people. Now we're into the hundreds of thousands of people dying from this thing. It's not as bad as the flu of 1918. If you've been reading the parallels with the thing, but nevertheless, unless we get this under control, now that means either a vaccine or a treatment when you get sick, or it dies out on its own, which everybody thought might happen when we got to 105-degree temperatures here in Dallas and elsewhere. We thought maybe that would cure, the normal flu, and we go through flu seasons, that it kind of goes away during the summer. Hadn't happened. And now, of course, everybody's real nervous about, well, what's going to happen here come this fall and winter when we go back into the quote unquote the regular flu season anyway. But nevertheless, that's key. You got to get that under control. Jobs and spending, we got to take some of these 50-something million, 55 million people that have filed for unemployment and put them back to work. Restructure the jobs, reinvigorate it, and then as people start going back to work and getting income, what are they going to spend their money on? Well, right now, for example, you're not going to go to the local bar and buy a drink because it's been closed. You're not going to go to the local spa or the local gym and work out. You can't. They're closed. So what are people going to spend their money on? How are they going to spend the money? That you've heard me tell you before, about 70% of the national growth, the GDP growth, is based on personal consumption. That's you and me and everybody we know going out and spending 110% of what we make and making the economy go and blow. There's going to be short-term, medium-term, long run. And short-term, we know that the second quarter, the previous quarter, April, May, June, were the worst on record. That's the buzzword that I gave you. I'll show you, you got graphs and charts coming. So I'll show you here in a minute. The medium term, the third quarter, the fourth quarter, and the first quarter of next year, very, very important. We gotta get things back up into positive areas and moving forward in that fashion. So we'll see. Long run's going to be interesting too. What the secular changes are going to be coming out of this pandemic. We were talking, a few of us before we actually got online here, about office demand and what kind of office space is going to be wanted, as much space, how's it going to be configured. It seems to be a mixed bag of are people going to continue to want to, and are businesses going to continue to want to have their staff working from home, or are people really, because it's human nature to really be a conglomerate of animals, so we want to be together. Anyway, so we'll have to see. The recovery is going to be uneven, very uneven by industry. We're going to see some very differences. Housing is important. This time, I'm going to give you a little bit more about housing in this presentation I have in years past, because housing right now is probably one of the few industry segments in the economy that is actually doing well and is expanding and is expected and is hoped will be the catalyst and be the driver for general economic recovery. Commercial real estate is mixed. And I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know. It's very mixed. It's mixed by type, by location, downtown, suburban, some of the big cities, tertiary cities. We know the hotels, for example, although many people don't consider hotels a real estate category because it's a business, really. But retail and hotels are doing really being hit hard. The office segment, we're not sure of. Actually, the apartments are doing better than we thought they would. Industrial is holding up pretty well, particularly the warehouse distribution and so forth, part of it. And then there's going to be major shifts in the capital and money markets. We know that this is a potential problem area. I mentioned the debt levels, both sovereign debt, that's government debt, and that's not just the US, incidentally, by the way, that's global. That's absolutely global. And of course, right now, one of the things that's happening is the US dollar is in high demand. The US is still the least risky investment one can make. So if you're an institutional investor in Europe or in Southeast Asia or South America or wherever you might be, buying US Treasury bonds right now or notes is a pretty good deal in terms of the least risk going around the world. And even the corporate, we're seeing that's the reason corporations been able to borrow. They've been able to sell their bonds some. So how are we doing? All right, let me move on here. U.S. restaurants, they're not doing well. You guys are going to see that. People aren't eating out. They can't open up. Down over 60% in terms of bookings. Hotel occupancy rates, when they're less than 50%, hotels can't survive. Generally, rule of thumb, somewhere around 72, 75% occupancy rates, depending on ADRs and so forth, depending on the type of hotel it is and so forth. But business travel is down, air travel is down, people aren't going anywhere. That's the reason we're all here online. I used to come up to Arlington every year to the Dallas area and stay in a hotel. Well, I'm not there this year, and neither is anybody else. So it's been really tough. I mean, you can see it's down almost 80%. Here's the general pattern that we've been all watching. You've probably seen this graph before. The weekly unemployment claims, over 55 million here total. It's about 35%, more than a third of the workforce at one time. Or cumulatively filing for unemployment. The unemployment rate is actually fallen down to about 10.2 after being at 3.5 or 3.8 just a few months ago. Incidentally, the latest weekly numbers just came out this morning. I didn't have a chance to change the slide. It's just under 1 million. So the general pattern there, the trend of declining numbers is still in play. The next bar, the red bar, will be just below that horizontal. It was 963,000 claims filed, so we're just under 1 million. But you can see the black bars over far left. That's what the normal looks like. And it was around 200 to 220,000 a week, as opposed to now 1 million a week. So it's still nearly five times more than what the numbers there back in May and April were just astronomical. never saw anything like that before. Even back in the Great Depression, back in the 30s, it took a year and a half before the unemployment rate hit close to 20-25%. We did it. We didn't quite hit that high, but we had the kind of unemployment hit the market within just a matter of a few weeks, not months, but just a few weeks, almost a few days. Continued unemployment insurance claims. These are the official state numbers, and that number just came out this morning too. It's right at about 15.5 million. So that downward trend continues, but it's still, look way at back at the far left. Back on March 7th, it was 1.7 million, and it roughly been running at 17 million. So I mean, you're looking at 10 times the number. The effective unemployment rate, when we really get down to it, is not the 10.2. It's really close, somewhere between about 16 to 20%. For those of you who are statisticians and economists, the U6 is right at about 16.6%. So we're running in that category, and literally, it's almost changing daily because certain businesses are trying to reopen. Some states are trying to get their economy moving back forward. So it's such a balloon right now, going up and down. There's about 6 million, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's about 6 million jobs right now in existence, and a year ago there was about 6 million jobs, and there was about 4 million unemployed. Well, today there's about 6 million jobs, and there's about 16 or 17 million people unemployed, as you can see there on the graph. So you can see that within a year, the reversal of fortunes here have been just dramatic and just out of sight here. Here's a graph I picked up a little while ago. I don't know whether the numbers are specifically accurate or not, and it really doesn't matter. But so, for example, on the shopping and the retail, somewhere around a third, whether it's 35% or 33% or 30% or even 38%, who knows? We won't know for a year or two before what that number really going to be. But based on the estimate here, that's a big chunk of our retail segment. You can see restaurants, think in terms of roughly 50%. That's the number that's been bandied about the most, that roughly 50%, particularly of the single freestanding restaurants, non-chain, will probably, that closed down, that were forced to close down because of the pandemic, may never reopen. And then you can see roughly a quarter of the beauty and spas and fitness centers and so forth. And there are other types that are going on. This is going to be what we have to work through here in the coming months and probably in the coming couple of years to get our economy anywhere close to back to what it was back in 2019 and so forth. Now, one of the things here in Texas that we're looking for and talking about in our thinking of what's going to happen is that Texas has always been an entrepreneurial state. It's a relatively easy area of the country because of lower regulatory pressures and constraints to perhaps go into business yourself. Sorry about that. This is one of the perils of working at home. You can probably hear the lawnmower outside. Wouldn't you know that, of course, the lawn guys showed up here this morning right as we got started. Anyway, I can hear them. I don't know, but the window right here is out to my front yard. Anyway, we're going to have to see whether or not this entrepreneurial spirit comes back, and will new businesses replace the old ones? Will people who were in business were forced to have to close down, lack of capital being always the first issue? Will the banks and financial institutions help reinvigorate the economy by financing new startup businesses and so forth? Small Business Administration is going to have to get involved with this and do a better job maybe than what they've done historically on it. What's it going to take? Well, as I said, we're going to have to get the virus under control. It won't ever go away completely. What I understand from the healthcare experts is this is like all these other strains of flu that we've had for the past 20 years or more. They don't ever completely go away. You don't actually destroy it. What you have to do is either find a vaccine or a medication of treatment, or if you catch it, then you can be treated so that it's not such a devastating result. But what we're going to see is, and what it's going to take is, that the fall in overall demand, just across the board, demand for everything from oil to buying gasoline at the store, buying clothes. Nobody's going to shopping centers anymore anyway. These are leading to the business failures. And so consumer and business spending has got to come back. We've got to reemploy all these people. And incidentally, if you haven't thought of it this way, and you're all aware of it, this is a global issue. There isn't any country that's been spared. No area of the world has been spared, either in terms of the virus or the downturn in the economy. So there's no global driver, economic driver. There's nobody accelerating and doing a lot of business that's creating global trade to lift everybody up and do well. In fact, most of the world is waiting for China and the U.S. to come back up and help bring them up. I don't know if anybody's really counting on Europe. We'll have to wait and see on that. Inflation is not an immediate concern. It probably will be in about 2 or 3 years, but at least for the next foreseeable year, plus or minus, we don't see much change going on or any kind of threat going on. The CPI, the core CPI, and all, there's about 8 or 9 measures. The PCE, price deflator, which is what the Fed looks at. They're all running very, very low. They've been low. They're staying there. And right now, and until that consumption demand and people start spending more money and getting out and spending money on discretionary items, you really won't see prices start being pulled up or pushed up from the spending. So interest rates are going to stay low. Everybody is in agreement that the Fed is going to be under no pressure. In fact, pressure specifically not to raise rates and not to try to slow down the economy, and in fact to maybe let inflation go higher than what their traditional target ranges of 2 or 2.5% might be. Maybe let it run to 3 or 4% for a while to get the economy churning again and getting it going. Taxes and spending, brother, I hate hitting this one, but it's at every level, federal, state, and local. Every level of government is spending a lot more money than what they got, and they're going to have to pay for it eventually. And so I hate to be the bearer of really bad news, but taxes are going to go up. There's no way they cannot go up. That we're doing too many things, spending too much money from the federal debt, national debt, down to state level, the school districts, the local governments, city, county, and so forth. They're all taking it right now. Everybody is rebudgeting for the coming year and the coming maybe biennium if they have to. It's going to be a mess. It's not here yet. We're not seeing it yet, but it's sure coming. Consumer confidence tried to bounce back up in June, down a little bit in July. You can see that little right out there at the tail end of the curve. But look at the drop from February to May. I mean, that's what an economy looks like when it falls off the cliff. The good news here is from the conference board is that some of their other measures, and I don't have the graph for you, but the expectations index and the look out to the future generally has been pretty good. So there is some reason for positive thinking that the consumer is going to come back, is going to start spending money and doing well and generate positive growth into the economy. I was talking about inflation. Here's core CPI and CPI. The core is just without food and energy. Gas prices, gasoline prices at the pumps have been going up and down along with the price of oil. So that was one of the big reasons for the fall off of the big drop there in CPI that you see there starting in January of 2020. But now has with back up to $40 a barrel, bounced back up. The core CPI is still, but you'll notice both of them are one's at about 1%, one's at about 1.5%, and when the target is 2.5%, you're well below target. And you can see how erratic it's been over time since '08. So it's that way. Retail sales, this is one of these things that we're looking at. Retail sales have bounced back reasonably well. The July number is not out. I tried to find it yesterday. It's not out yet. It won't be out for about another 5 days. But the expectation is that the July number will also be up a significant percentage amount and probably put us back up pretty close. This is very important. We need retail sales to come back up. Some of that is because, of course, some of the restaurants and food services and so forth, at least, are doing takeout and limited in restaurant seating and that kind of thing. So it's gone from basically zero up to something. So that's a positive increase. The Small Business Optimism Index, this is the survey by National Federation of Independent Businesses. They issued a statement back in May that they thought about 52% of these small businesses might go out of business. And you saw the data there earlier. A lot of the freestanding ma and pa operations are really going to be hurting. You can see that from April, the big decline from February to April, and then a bounce back, almost a V-shaped bounce back. But then when the number of cases, and particularly toward the end of May and into June, started increasing with the virus, then the optimism wasn't quite as positive as it was when it looked like we were going to come up out of the water. Interest rates. Basically, I've already told you what I already know about interest rates. They're going to stay low. They're low, and they're going to stay there for a while. The green line, the federal funds rate, the overnight bank lending rate, which is what the Fed works with every 6 weeks. I think their next meeting is scheduled for September 20-something. Nevertheless, it's effectively zero. Technically, we pointed out at 0.25%, but it's essentially zero. That blue line, the 10-year Treasury, which is benchmark interest rate, not only in the U.S. but around the world, and that one is historically low. It's down, running around about 0.6, 0.65%. It bouncing around in that vicinity. It's incredibly low. It's going to probably stay that way for at least the foreseeable 2 or 3 quarters. Now, after that, a lot of bets are off. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate, most of you are well aware of it. And this carries over to lending rates also for some of some commercial property, but not as much. But for the housing market, that rate, I don't have the July number. I'm not going to be surprised. It's going to be right at 3. It might be about 3.03 or 3.05 or something like that. But it's going to be very close to the 3 level. If you want to go get a 15-year loan right now, you can get down pretty close to 2% for 15 years. So that's triggering a lot of refis. This is one of the reasons that, in fact, it's one of the major reasons why we're looking for the housing sector to generate and be a driver of economic recovery, because people are going to want to get out and take advantage of these historically low rates. Now, here's something I don't generally show in a lot of my presentations. I don't think I've shown it to this group before, but this is to reinforce that concept that this is a global phenomenon, and that you need to see it. And what you can see is that not only are the advanced economies all negative and big negatives. I mean, when France is -12 and Europe is -10 and Spain is -13 and United Kingdom, England, Britain is -10%. US -8%. But you can see it's also in those emerging markets, and those are the marginal markets. Those are the markets that create the increase in demand for products and services, and particularly oil, that we've relied on. And those countries are also having trouble. Now, you'll see that the projection for 2021 does show significant recovery, everybody back into the positive category. But if the U.S., for example, goes down 8% this year, and that's a guess, but right now it's a pretty good, it's as good as guess as any. But if we go down 8% this year and only come up 4.5% next year, you still aren't back up to break even. If you go down 8%, you got to come up about 15% to break even because of the way that the world works. So I show you this, that there is hope. The 2021 numbers are looking good, but real full recovery in terms of looking anything like we looked like in 2019 or 2018 is probably going to be out to 2022 and maybe even 2023, assuming that nothing else happens and no other problems come down the pike to give us problems. Most of you are familiar with this. We had a negative 30, right at 33% GDP growth for the second quarter. That's that worst on record that I was talking about, and the buzzword there. On a year-over-year basis, that's an annualized quarterly. That's the quarter change annualized. So it generally looks a little bit more inflated. But on a year-to-year, second quarter last year to second quarter this year, we were down just a little less than 10%, down 9.5%, which is still bad enough, which is still almost a record decline on a one quarter to one quarter basis. So it's we got hit real hard. Now, I mentioned earlier that the third quarter and fourth quarter of this year are going to be really, really important. The general consensus, and that means we're probably wrong, but the general consensus is that we're expecting the third quarter annualized change to probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25%. Don't hold your breath on that, but that's the general expectation. And mainly it's because the second quarter was so low that anything up is going to look significantly up, and percentage-wise, and the arithmetic is going to work that way. Here's a good view. When recreational services, that's all those gyms and spas and theme parks, and now I don't know if you've been watching the Rangers on TV, but isn't it weird watching a baseball game with nobody in the stands? And of course now they got the cutout pictures. I don't know whether I want my cutout picture there or not, but food and services down 28%, recreation down 42%, transportation services, that's everybody from Uber and Lyft to the airline industries and so forth, down nearly 40%. Gasoline down a third. That means also that gas tax revenue to the state is down significantly. So you're seeing these kinds of things. Healthcare, most people would have thought healthcare would have had a positive increase. Nah, think of all the doctors, dentists, and everybody on a day-to-day medical basis that had to close up shop. They were not considered essential. Now, the hospitals were essential. The emergency rooms were essential. Those kinds of things were, but in fact, there was just a report out here yesterday, the day before, still advising people don't go to the dentist. You just don't need to. The risk of the virus is just too much. Let's turn to Texas. Texas has had a staged or phased reopening, as you well know. The governor has done that. And we kind of went up and down. We took 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that sort. That was a no-win. I'm apolitical. I don't care about the politics. But that was a no-win kind of situation. So, and probably not to be it was not unexpected that it was going to have to be kind of sketchy and problematic and so forth going through. Job recovery, we got to get Texans back to work. One of the interesting issues, of course, with the extra benefit on unemployment, the $600 a week, which gave out, I'm aware, at the end of July. But there was a lot of unwillingness to come back to work because a lot of people were making more with the unemployment insurance than they were when they were working. So that you had no incentive to go back to work. I still believe whatever comes out of Congress here, whenever, they probably are going to make it somewhat retroactive and have some kind of extra benefit on top of the state going on. The other, though, is that people have gotten used to working at home. One of the other problems, of course, childcare centers and so forth are closed down, and the schools are an absolute mess in terms of, and I don't envy any of the school districts trying to figure out how to conduct school this year. I don't have an answer, but it is a problem. And of course, so many people are nervous about sending their kids back to school, so they're going to keep them at home and do online. Well, then you got to be there too. And so it's not easy to go back to work anyway. Consumer attitudes and spending patterns are changing. Businesses, some are going to go back into business, some are not going to go back out, some are going to hire more people, fewer people. It'll be interesting. The energy industry, we know, is being changed. It's not going to be the same. The level of debt that financed a lot of the wildcatters and the startup energy companies and so forth back in the early stages of the fracking business, those are going to go by the boards. It's being consolidated, and we'll have to see. Housing is rebounding well. I'm going to show you in a minute. And then, of course, the state and local governments, just like the federal, it remains to be seen what Dallas, Tarrant County going to do, but the city of Fort Worth and city of Dallas and the other cities around Addison and so forth, what everybody's going to be doing, the cities and the counties. Property taxes are probably going to be okay because we so far haven't really seen that much of a change in residential base, and it probably take a year or so to capture any change in the commercial. Texas weekly unemployment claims that don't have the August 8 number. That one hadn't been released yet. We anticipate it being lower and continuing the trend. You can see it went down, went back up, down again. That was when, and Texas became one of the hot spots when the virus effects happened. You can see that, and no surprise, I mean, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston are going to obviously have the most. They got the most people. So it's just to give you an idea of how much unemployment. This is kind of what we were expecting Dallas to do. I just thought I'd show it to you so you kind of think about it. First quarter of the year, actually, total employment in the Dallas-Fort Worth area was actually up a little over 3%. But as of June, on a year-over-year basis, it was down about 5%. So I don't think you're going to see that green bar out there this year. I don't think we're going to see the 2.5%. It'll be interesting to see if in the second half of the year we can kind of offset that decline enough to at least sort of break even, and maybe even there is a possibility that could be a small positive number. I'm expecting the rate of change there to be relatively small, but right now it's really tough to tell whether it's going to be anywhere from -2.5 to +2.5 or something like that. So we'll have to see how that works. Unemployment rates, I thought I'd give you a hint here. You know, back in June a year ago, it was 3.5%. June this year is 8.3. May is our worst on record. May is our bad month. So we topped out or bottomed out, depending on which way you like to look at unemployment rates, at 12.6% for the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just shy of 13%. Gotten it down, down to 8.3. I think the trend is still down in that direction. I don't think we'll see the 3.5% again for a while. But Dallas-Fort Worth is poised, quite frankly, to do pretty well. The economy is still pretty good. The Texas leading economic indicators, June showed an increase. The July number hadn't come out yet, but we are seeing some bounce back. And you can see from February to April, just like with everything else, fell off the cliff. It's similar to back at the Great Recession. The difference is that this happened in a matter of about 3 months. Back in the Great Recession, that fall off took about 1.5 years. So it was such a quick, momentous decline in the thing. Here's what the oil and gas looks like. You can see the price of oil. These are weekly numbers, so you don't see the negative number. That was just one day. But for that week of April 24th, I think it was $3.50 was the low point for the week average, the 350, because of the one day in there with a big negative. And the rig count has continued to fall. It's beginning to level out right at 104, 103 active rigs. So there's some drilling going on, but not very much. What we're being told is that probably don't expect much help on the rigs until that price of oil gets probably closer back up to 55 or 60, which at least for the time being, it doesn't look like it's going to get there anytime soon. It looks like the price may level out here, at least for the time. The big issue was globally. It's a global price. We can't do anything about it domestically. And the global demand fell about 20 million barrels a day. And we were already oversupplied. So when the demand fell with an oversupplied market in the first place, then it just isn't going to support higher prices. And of course, I think one of the things that's also being accelerated here with the a lot of things are being accelerated with the pandemic. Demand for certain kinds of things and services. E-commerce has gone from about 9% of total retail to about 16, 17%. Those kinds of things. It's really accelerated a lot of things. But one of the things that's accelerated is non-oil energy, the green fuels, wind and solar in particular, for energy production. So we'll have to see. Something I wanted to talk about with the group here. I think it's fair to say that a few years from now, when we all look back at the good old days of the 20 teens, trust me, the 20 teens are going to wind up being the good old days, because it was a phenomenal decade for Texas in terms of overall growth. I mean, we averaged adding over 270,000 jobs a year. We averaged adding just under 500,000 people a year, about 425,000 people a year. I mean, this was a phenomenal decade for the whole state and the growth of the state and the economic expansion of the state and the demographic expansion. I don't think there's any question but what the 2020s are not going to be a replication of the 20 teens. Percentages can't, because the base is going to be bigger, so the arithmetic won't work. But it just, we probably are not going to see the relocation of jobs and industries and so forth as much in the decade of the 2020s as we did back in the 20 teens. Dallas-Fort Worth was one of the primary beneficiaries of this phenomenal growth, the relocation of regional and national headquarters of major corporations coming into the area, the creation of new companies coming into the area. I think the 2020s will still be a prosperous decade, and I'm talking the whole decade here. I think it'll still be a prosperous decade. It just may not have the same oomph as the previous decade, but I think things are still going to be good. And I know Dallas-Fort Worth is still well poised to take advantage of the growth and the expansion that is going to come. Demographics, these are similar demographics that I've shown you before. If we grew at the same rate as we did between 2000 and 2010, the projection was, and extrapolating it on out, we'd go up to about 54 million people. Those projections were revised a couple of years ago, in 2018 actually, by the state demographer's office and lowered somewhat based on the rate of growth that occurred the 5-year period 2010 to 2015. Of course, we're waiting on the 2020 census, and among other things that's really gotten screwed up here with the pandemic is the census. I hope all of you got counted early and often, because we need as many people as we can to get our fair share of all of the allocations and so on. It's going to create quite a problem and dilemma for the statisticians and the demographers and so forth, of who got counted and who didn't get counted and who got counted accurately and where are they and what are they and in racial composition and age and sex and everything else. So I hope all of you got your census in. Here's the graph I've shown you. Here's the longer term outlook, and you can see the Metroplex there is blue. The 4 principal counties, Tarrant, Dallas, Denton, and Collin are dark blue with all of this. And here's something else that's been accelerated with the pandemic. We are seeing, at least in the short run, definite movement or shift of buyers of homes and housing looking to go to the suburbs, exurbs, to the smaller surrounding towns that were tertiary and secondary communities to the main area. Some of it is the millennials. You know, you've heard me joke about the millennials. One of the things that's going on with the millennials, and they can't stand it because they can't do anything about it, but they're getting older. And now the leading millennials are 35 to 40. They've finally gotten around to getting married, having kids and so forth. So they're looking for the suburbs, but the pandemic accelerated that to get people into less dense housing, particularly here the last 4 or 5 months. If you were holed up in an apartment with, you know, an 850 square foot apartment with a kid or two, and you can't get out and you can't do anything, you can't go anywhere, you're ready to go. You ready to get out. So we're seeing that move out market, particularly from renters to homeowners. And we just issued a report here 2 days ago from the Real Estate Center. We just hit a record 67.6% home ownership rate during the second quarter of this year. It was up from 63.8. I mean, it just ballooned for the home ownership rate. It's also true that the renters shrunk as people started moving in together and being together and so forth. Yes, that's my big dog back behind us. I don't know what she's barking at, but she's having a good time at it. You can see the urban triangle is still going to continue to be there. Let me turn our attention. Let me talk a little bit about the housing data. The forbearance issue, the mortgages that have been into forbearance, that rate or share of loans has been falling. It's been going down, and making that kind of change. We're real concerned of what percentage of those loans are going to wind up being foreclosures. That's not going to happen next month or the month after, but sometime during the next 6 to 12 months, we are going to see some foreclosures starting, because it's probably true that a lot of the people who have lost their jobs and been laid off or furloughed or whatever are not necessarily going to get hired back real quickly. New home sales have been increasing phenomenally. New home market is really strong. Biggest problem there is the home builders can't build them fast enough. It's still down. Housing starts have been down, even at the rate, even though it increased in June by 13%, it was still at a very low unit annual rate. That number should be closer to more like 1 million instead of 775,000 or 776. So it's better than what it was. It's not as good as what it really should be. Existing home sales are picking back up. Again, same kind of issue in terms of rates of increase. Yeah, it's up 20%, but at 4.7 million units, that number should be closer to 5 million. So you know, we're looking at those kind of things. The thing that's going on, there's a housing shortage. The inventory, the number of homes actually being listed for sale versus what the demand for people buying the homes is still way out of balance. The demand far exceeding the supply. And economics 101, when you have demand exceeding supply, you're going to get price increases. So the price of housing continues to rise. And in fact, a couple of the national reports that I've seen lately, I mean, they're talking about home prices up 8, 9, 10% nationally. Our numbers don't indicate that level of increase. We're looking at between 4 and 5%, or 4 to 5.5%, depending on the market. But we're still seeing prices going up. Mortgage rates, of course, all-time low. Housing starts hit a 5-year low in May. That was the fall off that came March, April, May. And then June picked back up and July is picking up too. Here's what it looks like graphically. You can see the new home sales are finally that's the orange line, kind of back on track after the dramatic drop in April and May. June comes bouncing back up. Existing home sales has not bounced back. It's positive back from what it was, the downturn in April and May, but still not back up. We're expecting that July number, incidentally, it hadn't been released nationally, but we're expecting that to be very strong. That we're expecting that blue line to bounce on back up, probably close to the 5 million seasonally adjusted number. And the reason for that optimism is the percent growth in single-family purchase mortgage applications through August. August 14th is still up over 20% from what it was a year ago, and you can see that pent-up demand where demand was dropped back in the second quarter in March, April, and in May, is pushed out into June, July, and August. So we're expecting strong July numbers, probably strong August numbers. Fourth quarter, we're not sure of. Fourth quarter probably is going to go back to quote unquote some sort of level or average level. Still be positive, but probably not show the kind of growth. Home builder optimism has rebounded back. That's the V-shaped dark line there. But you can see the starts have not bounced back as quickly as we thought. And you can see how in March, April, May of this year, the housing starts dropped off dramatically, and they're having a tough time coming back up to do it. In Texas, we're still doing it. Median price in Texas, and this is first quarter of this year. The first quarter was actually a very strong quarter. Prices were up 5%. Listings are actually down 4%. Sales were up nearly 9%. You can see above the closed sales, the price distribution, where nearly 60% of the home sales are between $100,000 and $300,000 across. This is across the state. Months inventory down there at 3.2%. Here, let me take you through. March was the last of the good months, if you will. March, remember, it was the last week of March that things really started going to hell in a handbasket. But for the month, prices were up almost 6%, 5 to 6%. Sales were actually up a little bit. Dallas-Fort Worth was down in the month itself, but year to date, for the first part of the first quarter, if you will, was up 7%. And then by May was our record bad month. Things just went to hell in a handbasket. Sales down in Dallas-Fort Worth area about 26%, 23% around the state. Average and median price actually were lower. What that really represented was not prices coming down. It was the distribution of sales. More and more, fewer high-priced properties were being bought and sold because the jumbo mortgage market more or less disappeared for about 2 or 3 months. And then so most of the sales were down in the lower price segments. And so it caused the overall averages and the median to actually come down. But notice out there, the months of inventory, the MOI, the months of inventory is 2.7. Normally, balanced market, that's about 6 or maybe a little better. So 2.7, really bad. June, we started picking back up. June, first half of the year to date, we were only down 2%. So given the real problems of March, April, and May, to only be down 2% for the first half of the year wasn't bad at all. Dallas, Fort Worth bounced back, the same kind of thing. Prices started coming back. What I'm pointing out here is the active listings. People were still, got real nervous about listing their home for sale, didn't want to list, weren't moving. Actually, you just came out of shelter in place, stay at home, don't move, don't go anywhere. So why would you list your home for sale? Even if you did, you couldn't go find another home to buy. So it wasn't like that. By July, the market is even stronger. Year to date now, we went from negative 2% the first half of the year to positive 2% on a year to date for the first 7 months of the year. And prices, now look what prices are doing. Now we're coming up close to 10%. Dallas, Fort Worth, 10% average and median up 7. Again, that's average and medians can be misleading. Look over there to the far right. I've got median price per square foot. That's putting everything on a per square foot basis. That's up that 4.6%, 5.8 for the state. But 4.6, that's at 4 to 5% increase. That's a better and more realistic measure of what values are really doing and so forth, or at least based on pricing. Active listings, though, are still down almost 30%. In months inventory declined down to 2.3. In Aggie speak, you ain't got none. You just don't have enough. So that's what's going on. You can see it's similar in Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and so forth. Where was housing going and where's the growth? I don't know if it's the end of urbanization movement. That probably is an overstatement. But for sure, we're going to see more and increased interest and movement into the suburbs, exurbs, the smaller communities, the surrounding counties, and so forth. It's interesting. I keep reading articles on this and hearing other experts express similar interest. And the one word that they're not using is urban spread or urban sprawl. But that is exactly what's going on. Is we're actually fueling a more urban sprawl, if you will, out to the suburbs and exurbs. And some of that is being pushed by housing affordability. It's simply, you can find the housing in that 100 to 300,000 price range where you saw that was 60% of the market. You need to get out further away from the central city area to find housing in that price category, and particularly new homes. Home builders are trying desperately to build in the 200 to 350 price bracket, and they have to get further out to do it with lower cost land and so forth. Right now, labor and material costs, though, are still making some of those prices and new home costs higher. The demand is changing for larger homes with more rooms. You can see me. I'm here in my home office. If I was this house is only about 3 years old. My wife and I built it. But if both of us were working at home, one of the things that's going on now is you want two offices, not one. Because I can tell you, if both of us were working from home, we don't want to work in the same room. So anyway, we're coming up with that. Multiple primary bedrooms. Smart, got to be heavily wired. Got to have all the broadband and so forth. And we don't know what the long term. Facebook and Twitter are setting the bar. They both announced that all of their employees are going to work from home at least through next summer, next June. And that was like 200,000 or 300,000 employees between those two operations. And we don't know who else is going to follow. I'm going to raise the issue, and I had a chance to talk to some providers here a week or two ago. Is Wi-Fi going to now become truly the public good? I mean, is the city of Dallas just going to have, and maybe the county, Dallas County, make Wi-Fi free and universal as a public service, a public good, maybe at some minimal cost? For one thing, for the school children. It's still a concern of the online education programs of how many of the kids don't have access to broadband coverage or have a computer in the first place to be able to use. We're gonna have to see. Single family building permits, we're still not building enough. Ironically, we're up about 9% for the year in terms of building permits. You can read this graph wherever. It's got all kinds of things. It was 16 years to recover back in the 1980s to get home building back up to what it was in its prior peak from 1983. We're already 15 years out from our prior peak in 2005, and we're nowhere near that peak. We're nowhere near 166,000 units a year. We're averaging about 110 since 2000 for the century. But first half of 20 is up. It's up 9%. We're expecting it to be up. If it just maintains the 9% for the second half of the year, it'll look something like that green bar there that you see, and you can see that's a dramatic increase. Here's what's going on in your area, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in terms of sales. Home sales, that the predominance of green on the left tells you where the home sales are up. You can see that the red is kind of in the middle there. People are moving out into the suburban areas. The prices on the right-hand side, and this is average price per square foot, incidentally, are also predominantly in the green, either the light green or the dark green, which indicates, again, prices being increasing and the demand pushing the price up. This is a report that's available if you're a realtor. You can go out to the Texas Realtors website and pull this up off of their market viewer. This is incidentally the data that we provide. So I use it because the Real Estate Center generates it. And you can see that for Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, that's the MSA. For the month of July, this is July, sales are up 23%. And for the year over year, it's up 1.7, call it 2%. It's interesting. It's the existing home market is still more or less at break even. It's more or less flat. But looking down there at the new construction, and you can see how it's up 13% for year over year. And look at the months inventory over on the far right. I've circled them. When you're less than 3 months, and particularly for new construction, that number should be 5 or 6 also, just like with the existing. Because generally the home builders will build spec and so forth and have an inventory of existing or built new homes that are offered for sale. But right now, and incidentally, this is new construction sale, new home sales that go through the MLS, that go through one of the MLS services in the area, in the MSA. So obviously we're not picking up all of the new home construction and so forth. We don't pick up obviously any of the contract jobs and those kinds of things. These are the home builders who use realtors as part of their marketing. In real estate, there's a lot of variables. The forbearance to foreclosure issue is going to be important here in the coming 6 to 12 months. The potential end, actually the moratorium on evictions kind of has ended. I know the president did a executive order here a couple of days ago, but if you look at it closely, it really didn't do anything except direct them to look at continuing. It didn't actually continue the moratorium on evictions, and even then, that was only for properties that had federal lending or federal loans. It does not affect private or non-federally backed loans that might be, for example, on an apartment building or an office building or a retail shopping center and so forth. And it's my understanding that those evictions are still entirely possible. Local justices of the peace are doing it differently, and of course different landlords are doing, because if you evict a tenant, your biggest problem, as you all well know, what do you replace them with? And right now, replacing a tenant is kind of difficult, not to mention the expense of transition costs. So maybe you're better off working with a tenant that might survive all of this pandemic effect and stay in place and work out something on the rent rather than just evicting them on general principle. Low interest rates still going to stimulate demand, particularly for housing. The low interest rates are helping to keep cap rates kind of in place and in check, also helping to keep expenses in check for landlords so rents don't go up quite as much. All of the business practices, brokerage, sales practices, facilities management, I'm sure, leasing and activity and so forth. It's the new technology and new processes, new world, this decade of the 2020s that I'm talking about is going to be an exciting and different decade than what many of you are used to. And I know you're incorporating all of these kinds of changes, just information and data that are now available that 10 years or 20 years ago, you didn't really have as easy access to. Home construction, we're looking for that to be a prime recovery activity. I put maybe, well, anything could go wrong, but it surely does need to be. And right now it looks like it's going to be. We're not going to count on non-residential construction. Everything I'm seeing, hearing, and being told by people in the field is that a lot of things are not going to get built, and things that are already under construction are going to get finished, but new projects and stuff that were on the drawing boards and being conceptualized and being planned, that now all of that is pretty much on hold until we can figure out what the markets are doing. It's a lot of wait and see. And we quite honestly, and I talk to appraisers a lot as well, we're not really seeing value impacts yet. I've already given you some statistics on the housing market. Housing prices in general, across the board, are not being negatively impacted by the virus and the slowdown, the economic slowdown. And in fact, just the opposite. They're actually being stimulated. Now, commercial real estate is something else. What I'm being told, and I've gotten this from several, is that, yeah, the cap rates are being bumped up depending on where it is, what kind of property it is, what the tenant mix and so forth. But at least in today's world, it's not unusual to see cap rates for particularly, say, retail property up 100 to 150 basis points from where they were, not too many months ago. So, but those are still being hard to find. Appraisers have to have historical comp sales and so forth. They're struggling to find a lot of that data. Here's what's going on around the state. I hope this is readable to you. The nice thing about it is I don't know what color you call that for Dallas Fort Worth. Is that fuchsia? I don't know what the heck that is. But anyway, you can see it. It stands out. So you can see that, for example, the warehouses, triple net rents are still trending up, and this is through second quarter. Warehouse completions, again, there was a lot under construction that was going on in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dallas-Fort Worth is still a major distribution center for the entire country. So that industrial warehouse distribution, logistics space, the market continues to be strong. Occupancy rates are kind of holding steady, a little bit of a downturn, but it's nothing. It's like 1 percentage point or so. Class A office space turning sideways. You can see that the completions where they peaked back in 2016, 17, those are now coming back around and flattening out. Occupancy rates are down just slightly. We haven't seen all of the impacts yet really work themselves through the market and so forth. Retail, you would have thought would have had more of an impact. The rental rates have been more or less holding forth, and I'm looking at the Dallas number there particularly. You can see in, for example, San Antonio, they're still increasing a bit, and even in Houston. But for Dallas, leveling out. Completions down a little bit, but leveling. Occupancy rate down, but not down very much, just a little bit, although it is down from about close to 96 to about 94%, so a couple of percentage points there. At net absorption, though, is falling off. Obviously, you would expect that as space, those completions are coming on board. It's really difficult to find tenants that anybody going into the retail business, particularly restaurants, clothing stores, a lot of others, bars, what have you. And of course, the shopping centers themselves, even the power centers, are in some problem. Cap rates for commercial cap rates, apartment market cap rates are you'll see most of these are beginning to fall or at least hold even from where they were, indicating that property values are still being supported. Now, what I was told by a couple of brokers lately is that, and it probably won't show up in the quarterly statistics for another quarter or two, is that these cap rates, particularly for retail down there on the bottom right, and for the apartments, are going to start bouncing up more, and the values coming down as the markets are so in such turmoil and change. Here's one that I thought you'd be interested in, like the apartment market. The occupancy rate for apartments really is actually slightly up by 0.4 of a point uh, since January of this year, and really has been able to hold steady for the last couple of years in that 90%, 91% range for hotel apartment occupancy. I can tell you that nationally, sorry about that. It never fails that you do one of these things, and that's when the service guys decide to show up and run their machines. But nationally, apartment rental collections are only down like 2% versus the same time period a year ago, before any of this ever happened. So now some of that is that $600 a week unemployment benefits that now are off the table for the time being. So August rents are probably being paid. It's going to be problematic about September and October rents, and then on into the fall and winter of how people are going to be able to maintain paying the rents. If you're interested at all, the Real Estate Center does put out quarterly commercial. We just issued it about a week or so ago for the second quarter. I go to the website there, recenter.tamu.edu, and please help yourself to reading our comments and so forth. We're like everybody else, trying to guess where it's going from here is a pure crapshoot. You just don't have any idea. Let me stop at that point and say thank you very much for having me. I know I had to cover a long waterfront here to explain what was going on and how all of this works out. So thank you for your indulgence.
No, thank you, Doctor. And a couple things you should know, we didn't really hear any of that stuff outside, so don't fret about that.
Well, I could hear it because it's right here to my right, and the guy was doing the mower right here, right off my window.
Well, that was fantastic, and there were some independent laughs, I know, on my end, and those out there. Appreciate your enthusiasm and your wit and wisdom. We do have a few questions. I've kind of distilled a few that were out there. In the big picture, how do you explain the capital markets, the equity markets, if you will? It feels so dire, and you talk about this as the worst quarter on record. And how do you explain the equity markets, and what should we expect? Is there a disconnect there?
No, it's not a complete disconnect. There is with me, because I don't know. I don't follow the stock market other than like everybody else. I'll look and see what the Dow Jones or the S&P 500 did on a daily basis, up and down. What's going on though? People aren't spending money, and even businesses and institutional investors aren't spending money. And what do you invest your money in right now? There's no fixed income asset, bonds or treasury notes. I mean, if the 10-year treasury is less than 1%, if it's 0.6 and that's risk-free, what is your alternative? So a lot of money is finding its way into the stock market, and there's a whole body of economic theory about all of the fiscal efforts and the payments and the government, that all it does is artificially increase asset prices, assets being stocks, particularly, and real estate.
Yeah.
Real estate is going to be the beneficiary of this too, because of low interest rates. Now, if you before could afford to buy a property, even a commercial property, for $1 million, if you can now borrow at 300 basis points less than what you would before, you might be able to pay 1.1 million for that property.
Yeah.
So it artificially increases asset prices. The stock market in particular is that day-to-day is a daily measure of those asset prices changing. In fact, it's minute to minute.
Got it. Hey, kind of a broader question. What changes do you see that will remain post-COVID, and other trends that might accelerate as a result? What comes to your mind when somebody asks that question?
We went through this about 20, 25 years ago when the internet first started, that people were going to try to work at home and telecommute. and we're going through that pattern again. You and I we were talking about it before we actually started the meeting, but now it has, because it's lasted so long and been forced, if you will, into the market for people to have to work at home. And now they have learned, and the businesses have learned, that their workforce doesn't necessarily have to work from home, for at least for some businesses. Some can do it, services and so forth. And we're now a service economy, which is interesting. It's incidentally one of the big differences of this downturn. It's affected the services industry as much or more than manufacturing. But aside from that, so that's one of the things. And also because we've got transportation and commuting, physical, getting in your car and taking an hour and a half to get to your office, you're better off to be at home and have that hour and a half at home and be productive or whatever. So one of the things that's going to have to get worked out is that. I mentioned earlier that I think the pandemic has accelerated e-commerce. I don't think there's any question about that. So retailers are very, very nervous about how much the e-trade is going to take away from people coming to their stores. And do I need as much space? Do I have to do it? Do I need a distribution center? Is everybody going to start buying their shoes and their clothes online instead of coming to, well, we know that the holding company, well, Lord & Taylor declared bankruptcy. The holding company for Men's Warehouse and Joseph A. Banks and one other of the men's, they just declared filed for chapter whatever bankruptcy. There's 3 or 4 others that have Neiman Marcus to hit closer to home to Dallas. So they're having a lot of trouble with that. So those longer term implications, I think we're going to have to figure them out. Education, I can tell. I'm here in College Station, and Texas A&M is trying to reopen. They're paying more attention to getting the football team back on the field than the students in the classroom, but that's a different story. It's going to be interesting if there's going to be a long-term impact on public education of doing more online, in-home studies. Most parents would tell you, no, don't do that. I need to get the kids out of the house. Don't tell them to stay at home. But that's going to be one of those issues. And also, what's going to happen when we go through this again? The general consensus seems to be this might not be it might not be another 100 years. It was 1918, we had the Spanish flu. 2019, 2020, we had the COVID-19. Those are the 2 biggies, but we've had some other little ones in between. And what's going to be the next one? And how bad will it be? And is everything going to just shut down again?
Yeah. Well, hey, I know your attitude and what you said before about the U.S. and Texans. Is there anything you would say as we close, that would make you smile and us feel a little differently?
Well, as I said in the course of the presentation, and I really did mean it, Dallas-Fort Worth is well positioned geographically, economically, land-wise, workforce, people-wise, to continue to be prosperous and expand. Okay, it's diversified economy. You're not really completely dependent on any one thing or even 1 or 2 things. You've got really good broad diversification. Middle of the country, low housing prices in Dallas-Fort Worth may seem high to those of you who live there and have been there for a while, but believe me, compared to the rest of the country, you're very, very, very attractive. So people still are going to want to come there. They can come and live in the Dallas-Fort Worth community very comfortably, very economically. So, I got nothing but good things to say. It's
hear you.
Going to have to fight the good fight.
There you go. Well, thank you, Doctor. This has been wonderful as always. Appreciate your time. And on behalf of CoreNet North Texas and EFMA, adios, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
I really enjoyed seeing everybody. all the names that I see on the screen.
Yeah, it's different. See you in person soon.
I hope so. Bye-bye.
Bye.